I'm speaking with Emmy-nominated composer Tony Morales, who was just nominated for his score to Hatfields and McCoys, which he co-composed with John Debney. Thanks so much for talking with me today.
Hey, Kai, thanks for having me.
So, I guess to start off, since we've never met, never spoken before, how did you get into music, and why did you decide to become, a film and TV composer?
Well, my original instrument was the guitar, and when I was younger, all I wanted to do was be in a rock band. And eventually that led me to Berklee College of Music in Boston, and it was there that I actually discovered film music. Excuse me. And from there it was all over. The guitar band drive had gone away, and I discovered a new fascination and love for composing, and wanted to pursue film music.
And so when did you make the migration out to LA?
Well, so after Berklee, we had, and again, we had discovered, and I had discovered, film music of Jerry Goldsmith and Elmer Bernstein and Bernard Herrmann, which is, all these great influences.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of Berklee, a friend of mine had mentioned the USC Scoring for Motion Picture and Television program.
Right.
And to boot, that coming year, Elmer Bernstein was going to be a teacher. And it was almost too much to pass, and I was like, oh my God, I have to apply, I have to try to get into this. So I pursued it, and that was an easy migration to make.
Right.
To Los Angeles. So I came out here and went through that program that year.
So now, you've worked with a lot of great composers, John Debney being one of them, and Brian Tyler and Harry Gregson Williams, and now you have Hatfields and McCoys, which has gained so much attention and praise. I can imagine doing any miniseries can be a daunting task. How did you and John decide to approach Hatfield and McCoys? Did you decide to take it on as one big film, or tackle it as the individual parts as self-contained episodes?
Well, working with John was great, and I was excited that he actually, asked me to come on board with him. And it was kind of, it wasn't necessarily a divide by episode and conquer. It was a real kind of an organic and natural process how we figured out how to move forward.
Mm-hmm.
We had a pretty tight schedule, so regardless of how we figured it out, we had to stick to the schedule and make sure we didn't get behind, because we really only had about 2.5 months, 3 months to complete the entire project.
Wow.
And then the air date was going to happen a month later after that, so there really wasn't a lot of wiggle room. We early on, the producers really wanted to have a thematic score, and they also wanted to keep it authentic to the time and the region. So
right.
once we all got on the same page creatively, it was a matter of just kind of chipping away. Not to water it down so much, but it was a matter of writing and staying on course. We would have production sessions probably every 2 or 3 weeks, because the score is heavily involves instrumentalists and soloists. We used Elizabeth Scott for the vocals, and a fiddle and several guitars and these kinds of things. So we were writing in between, recording them, continued writing, recorded some more, and eventually we delivered on time, and everything worked out.
So, how did you guys settle on the whole soundscape of the score? I loved it, by the way. It really is one of my favorite scores of the year, and it definitely has a kind of a very heavy Western feel, but it doesn't really call attention to itself as a Western, and that's what I really loved about it. It's not like, oh, this is Ennio Morricone, this is blah blah blah. It just felt so organic in the moment. So how did you settle on that sound of with the instrumentation and all that, and what was your overall, I guess, musical goal for the score?
Well, thank you. I'm glad you liked it. Well, once, as I mentioned, with the themes, we used theme development sort of happened, and the inspiration came from more of the region, Appalachia, roots music. They really wanted to make sure we were authentic to that, and we didn't lend the sound to maybe think you're out west in a Cowboys kind of thing, because this is a different story, being in Virginia, Kentucky. So that was the inspiration as far as melodic melodic things would go. And then, John and I really wanted to make sure we kept this thing contemporary, and as far as doing almost like a hybrid of some contemporary sounds with these traditional Appalachian roots instruments. And so that was pretty much the approach, and kept us on track throughout.
Mm-hmm. And so working with, and you've worked with John on some of his other scores before, and so what was the collaborative process like with him on this? And how did you guys handle the workload? Did you guys split it up? Did you work together on certain parts, or was it like, you take this, I take that?
It was a great collaboration. It was a little bit like the last thing you mentioned. I'll take this, you take that kind of approach. Mm-hmm. It was with the themes, when the themes were approved early on, that was kind of how we got the ball rolling. And I had jumped to a few cues that I knew was going to use this theme that I had just done. John went to several cues where his themes were being used, and once we kind of got our feet wet and started getting comfortable with the sound we were creating, then it was a matter of, okay, I've just finished this cue, and the next one kind of comes close to it. I'm just going to continue on with the next couple of cues, and John be great. Okay, well, I'm over at this part in the front of the show. I'm just going to finish up this next act, and it was kind of like that, a little back and forth the whole time. It was a lot of fun.
Was it hard to keep a consistent, I guess, voice, or?
Actually, it's funny you mentioned that. The one thing I forgot to mention was everything we wrote we kept on a general server that both of us could access.
Uh-huh.
And it was a matter of, and at the end of the day, I'd send him an email, John, here, I just posted my track, take a listen, see what you think. And I would check out everything he wrote. So we were totally on the same page the whole time, and heard what each other was doing. So
mm-hmm.
It wasn't a matter of guessing or anything like that. It was full-on collaborative.
Right. It's funny because I've talked to other composers who've done like video games, like co-composed, and I was like, oh, how is it like working with so and so? And they're like, oh, I've never met that person. Like, it was just,
oh, really?
Yeah, they're just so separate, and it still managed to become some of a. They said they would just kind of imagine, thinking, oh, I'm going to try to, be like this other person and try to make a cohesive voice, but it ended up working out. But I thought that was so crazy that they've never met and they were able to co-compose.
That sounds like a tough way to work. John and I fortunately had a really good relationship before Hatfields McCoys. We had done a few projects. He'd called me on to do some arranging for him.
Right.
And we just had a great relationship. So going in, it really was easy. And again, both of us are really upfront guys. It was a matter of let's hear the sound that let's have fun with it and
mm-hmm.
see what we can make this.
And yeah, it definitely comes through in the final product. So as a composer, just, as yourself, when you're starting on a project, where do you draw most of your inspiration from the most? Would you say it would be the characters, the story, or the setting? Like, what really speaks to you and really influences your first, take on the score?
Well, it's a bit of a process, and it kind of can change from job to job.
Mm-hmm.
But first things first, you are here to support the film.
Right.
So based on the story, or if there's a character is particularly interesting and kind of you can run with something as an inspiration, I kind of look for those things right off the bat when I'm watching something. And then based on the conversations, and because it's always a process, you can have a lot of talking at first, but until you sit and start to write notes, it's not until then that things get tested.
Mm-hmm.
And what could actually lend, what can support this film in a great way, and what could maybe be a distraction. So that's probably my first step, and then I'll start working with theme development. And themes can be what you would think of as a traditional theme, melodic theme, or it can even be as simple as just a tonality, a sound, a particular sound that would relate to a and or character.
Right.
And then keep the process going.
Now, when you say distraction, do you mean like music that's just too front and center? Like, when does music become a distraction?
Exactly. If it's just a matter of if it's almost, because there's been projects where I've tried some music and it really was almost too much. If it's a moving scene and you have some really important dialogue going back and forth, but yet just because something might have been temp there doesn't really mean that it needs to be
mm-hmm.
there. There might be a piece of music like, wow, this is really a little maybe it's just a little too much, maybe it's just a little too emotional for the dialogue, or we want to still not really be told how we're supposed to feel yet.
Right.
That's kind of what I mean by abstraction.
And so, now going back to Hatfields and McCoys, the soundtrack is pretty packed with around 80 minutes of music. How much music was there in total when you guys were all said and done?
The soundtrack is, I got to tell you, I think it's roughly around 95 and 96% of what we wrote.
Oh, wow.
That was in the show. Yeah, we really jam-packed, and it was funny because at the end I'm like, wow, John, are we going to fit all this? And he's like, we're going to get right to the very limit, and that's going to be that. And some cues that are not on there are a few things that are shorter and probably not the most interesting to listen to in a setting of just sitting and listening to a CD. But yeah, you really got the bulk of everything that was written and produced.
And you hear stuff that, like, when you have to omit something, how hard is it to condense, an entire score onto a single listening experience? I mean, do you be like how do you determine what's not worthy of the CD?
Well, I think you have to kind of put yourself in the listener's chair and say, okay, I know I sat with this cue, and even if it's 10 seconds long and I really love it, I don't think as a listener they're going to appreciate a 10-second track.
Okay.
And sometimes in those situations you can take a few things and make a compilation. So one cue may actually exist and have, but what the listener doesn't know is that one cue is a compilation of 4 or 5 cues. Right. Just for listening balance. But again, there's limitations to an actual CD release, so you can't have. There's only so much space it can fit, and there was just so much music from this project. Yeah. It was just impossible to get it on there without some sort of double platinum live release or something.
Well, maybe in the future,
Hey, I'm always open.
Well, to wrap things up, I always like to ask composers this question: if you had the chance to score any film ever made, with no disrespect to the original composer, what film would you choose?
Wow, that's a tough question. And one I was not prepared for. Gosh, it's funny. I could probably give you a different answer on a different day of any month. It would change, I think, by my mood. But I think my latest interest in a type of score I'd love to be involved in is more of a subtle type of score, something that's a little more mood-like and not necessarily needing to be really hit-oriented. Right. For example, I'm a real big fan of Cliff Martinez. I love what he does.
I love him. Yeah, he's great.
To work on, and he always gets these great projects that are, the music is really important in setting the tone. But then he just takes you on a ride the rest of the movie and doesn't necessarily have to play the action or anything like that. It's just more of a mood setting. Like Solaris is really a fantastic score.
I really loved Drive. Drive was the colors and atmospheres and just very well done.
Exactly. So if as opposed to an actual movie, I think if I got a chance to get creative and have fun with something, I'd like to take that sort of approach with something that, and that's today. Maybe we'll talk tomorrow and I'll give you a different answer.
Well, it's a really good answer. I like it. And well, once again, congratulations for the nomination. It's well deserved, and I'll be rooting for you guys next month. And thank you so much for the opportunity. It was a great honor, Tony.
Okay, well, thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to be here, and look forward to talking to you again.
All righty.